everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It is me, it is Nate, and we are going to have a impromptu guest host of Milo from Trash Future, because we're going to be talking about overseas stuff, and who else to give us great Russian accents than Milo. Milo, how you doing?
Hello, it's very nice to be here.
It's funny because it sound like your Russian because you actually speak Russian, you're fluent in Russian, you work for Russian companies, but when you do it, it sounds like you're being me and being an asshole. Boris and Natasha, we'll get moose and squirrel.
Moose and squirrel.
Did you never watch? Did you never watch
was that Rocky and Bullwinkle?
Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yeah.
I saw the live action Rocky and Bullwinkle movie that they released in 2001. Does anyone remember that?
Yeah, it was bad if I remember correctly. But I mean, there was that weird trend of making 60s children's cartoons into live action movies in the early 2000s, like the various live action Scooby-Doo movies and Rocky and Bullwinkle and so on and so forth. But
and that live action version they did of the Michael Jordan cartoon from the 1960s.
I mean, are you talking about Space Jam?
Space Jam was awesome. First off, that movie's amazing. So don't even, Milo. We'll kick you off the show right now. You're going to talk shit about Space Jam.
Space Jam holds a special place in our hearts because you would have been, 13 or 14 when it came out, Francis?
That was 96, so yeah, about that.
96, yeah. Yeah, I was turning 12. So yeah, Space Jam. And if you don't know this, folks, the Space Jam website, the website made as a promotional thing for the film in 1996, is still up in its absolute amazing 1996 web design glory. You ought to check that out. However,
probably still looks better than the website for the British taxation service.
Yeah, I was going to say, another thing for another in-joke for American listeners who don't know as much about British stuff, web design in Britain is deeply cursed. Some websites get it, but a lot of people are like, oh, well, I mean, it's a website and it loads. That's good enough. And it looks like some GeoCities shit from 2003. I'm not kidding. So it's
incredible. I
don't know what it is, and I don't like talking too much shit about my adopted country, but my God, I don't know what it is with web design. But however, it would be fun to just riff on cross-cultural differences, but there's been some shit going down in the world that's been really deeply weird and very sad, too. Specifically, Donald Trump giving Recep Tayyip Erdogan the green light to invade northern Syria and attack the Kurds has been both a huge, incredible, dismaying betrayal, and also has set off some really weird fault lines in the Republican establishment in America, specifically those affiliated with the military.
Donald Trump is a messy bitch who loves drama. We've said it before, we'll say it again.
He is indeed. And who better to help him with drama than Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the man who got on TV and said, people shouldn't drink alcohol, they should drink ayran instead. It's yogurt, it's better. It doesn't get you drunk, it makes you contemplate Islam better. The man who managed to nearly get overthrown because of riots and protests that broke out in his country because basically every single green space in Istanbul got demolished to build apartment complexes through his son's subsidiary company.
Nice.
Also a man who, when those protests went wild and the police started repressing them brutally, got CNN Turkey to cut the live broadcast and instead go to a documentary about penguins for some reason. I don't know why.
That's full Soviet Union shit. Fucking place one lake when the fucking government's collapsing.
Yeah, it's incredible stuff. So anyway, Donald Trump's messy bitch comrade in that sounded very southern, comrade in Turkey has invaded northern Syria, and what that means is that Rojava, the Kurdish, basically the breakaway Kurdish state that exists there, which is, by the way, extremely left-wing and extremely good in our estimation, and also extremely good at defeating ISIS, is now facing an enemy that has basically mechanized infantry, heavy units like tanks, an air force, etc., and stands to be wiped out. Now, I don't know a shitload about the military specifics of Syria because still Syria has been and remains a madness rune, and if you contemplate it too long, you go insane and start posting really weird shit online. However, what I do know about is Republican allegiances in America and the fact that none of their hard lines mean anything. Basically, they all fold in service of Trump. However, this one has been a little bit different.
Yeah, this one, so since Trump's inauguration, there have been a lot of people who have been just really, I guess they've been really ride or die, right? You get the deplorables, you get all of the weird blonde ladies with hats, the MAGA hat avatars that says deplorable 2020 and has the a bio that says conservative mom 2A 1A Trump 2020 get out of my fucking country kind of shit. But like as Trump's presidency has gone by, it's like you can really see who the real fucking ride or die ones are. Like because at this point, there's plenty of people. There's like normal Republicans that I knew back in 2016 who like I talked to, and they're just like, "This is fucked up, man. I don't like. I voted for him because he's a Republican, but this is fucked up. This isn't what we were expecting." And then MAGA Christie would call that person a rhino, Republican in name only. But then as you keep moving down the line of Trump's presidency, he keeps losing people. But also the people who love him get crazier. Like, not just the QAnon people, but, it comes up to, like, we pulled back our support from the Kurds who have done nothing but support us and our bullshit overseas.
I'm just imagining the Never Trump Republicans being like, dude, there was a time when being a Republican, it was about being a good dude and hanging out with other dudes and having a great time, good vibes with your dudes. And now Donald Trump has just made it a bad vibe. It's not fun anymore. And I'd miss it, bro. I miss the good times.
He really has. Like, once upon a time, we used to all
Apologies for that accent.
We used to all be yelling about Pizzagate like normal people. And now that we've abandoned the Kurds and are allowing the Turkey to go in, because here's the thing: as soon as we allow Turkey to do it, we're going to allow everybody to do it. The Kurds spread across like Syria, Turkey, Iraq. There's a fourth country.
Iran too.
Iran, yeah. So they're in kind of all these places, and generally, like in Iraq, when I was there, it's just like, here's Iraq, and that's the Kurdistan, and we don't deal with that. That's the Kurd area is up north. We don't talk about it.
Yeah, I want to jump in about that because the Kurdish. So the Kurdish people obviously fought against Saddam Hussein's government, resisted Saddam's government. Saddam's government was obviously Sunni majoritarian, even though that country is majority Shia, and as a result, they were punished severely with all sorts of state repression. The thing that was used as part of the justification for the Iraq War in 2003 was that Saddam gassed his own people, and they specifically refer to the late 80s campaign to basically crush Kurdish resistance in the north of Iraq, which led to, for example, the Halabja massacre, where they gassed villages full of people. But another thing I would point out too is that the Kurdish people rose against Saddam in 1991 during the Gulf War, and we basically let them get crushed again. The reason why we had a no-fly zone over northern Iraq that basically NATO military is enforced in the 90s up until the 2003 invasion was because Saddam wanted to attack the Kurdish areas of the country. And so the Kurds, we've always counted on them as our allies, and we've always then dropped them like a hot potato once we don't need them anymore. And what I've noticed, for example, is people who worked in Iraq in 03, 04, there's a huge difference between the experienced people who were in Kurdistan versus people who were further south, who were in the Sunni Triangle or were south in the Shia parts near the Kuwaiti border. And particularly, the Kurdish people have worked very hard to support the U.S. or, if you want to call it NATO coalition, only to be basically thrown under the bus. For example, if I remember correctly, they had a referendum where they asked for independence in Iraq. We didn't really intervene when the Iraqis shut that down. And then similarly, going forward, the Kurdish people, the Yazidi religious minority and Kurdish people in general were horribly persecuted under ISIS, who, if you recall, are a Sunni sort of like annihilationist group. And so as a result, these people have faced incredible danger, and they've responded by organizing militarily and socially against it. We've partnered with them. We've sent special advisors, like special operations guys like Navy SEALs and Army Special Forces and such, to work with Kurdish militant groups who are, I should say, extremely secular, extremely left-wing, and very much opposed to, they were fighting ISIS. Whereas in other parts of the region, some of the groups where we found ourselves aligned have been, let's just say, a little softer on ISIS or on Al-Qaeda sort of ideology. And so, like I said, madness rune, I don't want to get into it too hard, but point being here, that there are a lot of people in the U.S. military establishment who are dismayed beyond belief at this, because many of them, either themselves or through close connections, have nothing but positive experiences about working with the Kurds. They were incredibly impressed by them, and obviously they empathized heavily with them in their struggle against ISIS, against Saddam, against the Turkish military. So to allow this to happen, and furthermore to allow another NATO country to invade, it's just been. I mean, I've seen personally more outrage about this from military folks that I knew when I was in than any other thing Trump has done, which is horrifying in a sense because it's like you were, there's a part of me that wants to say like, okay, you were cool with baby jails, you were cool with border camps, you were cool with Muslim ban, you were cool with all sorts of, just like finding ways to just sell out all of America's resources, like to basically prop up all of like your weird gambling friends or real estate buddies, into everything, like to include the VA. You didn't care. This bothers you. But at the same time, I realized that that's not necessarily the best way to approach it, because if this is an opening to break off some people to be anti-Trump, then good. But long story short, as a result of all of this, you're seeing a strange kind of political split in which, for example, noted Trump extreme toady Lindsey Graham is actually very much in opposition to this. So is Mitch McConnell, the man who does Trump's bidding, for his donors. It's weird to see. Will this hold? I don't know, because all of these Never Trump people, like whether they're columnists or whether they were Republican politicians, they've all folded. Like there's a much smaller Never Trump group of people than there was before, because all of them have just decided like, oh, well, I was anti-Trump, but then I saw a person with pink hair and I decided there's too many damn genders, so Trump is right. Like the extent to which people have said shit like that, I'm not exaggerating.
It's going to be very strange because one thing I noted over the weekend was Anthony Scaramucci doing a like, oh, well, nobody's above the law, and we're going to get that President Trump. And like, he's going to be the first one to try to the redemption arc of I never liked that Trump guy anyway. And it's like, dude, you literally like kissed his ass for the 74 hours that you worked for his administration before he fucking dumped you like a pail of dirty water into a garden or something. Like we're because like you said, if you go back far enough, back before Trump was even the nominee, you've got the Kurt Schlichters and the David Frenches and all these people out there who are just, no, bad. We shouldn't have this. And of course, they all do fold. And like either I don't know if it's an ideology, like they end up folding because they get pulled hard right, or because they understand that the gravy train gets fucking cut off. Because despite what you might think, and despite the whole do people like Trump, he has an over like 95% approval rating in the Republican Party. They all fucking love his ass. And that's what you're going up against.
I'm very excited for the Anthony Scaramucci Terminator 2 turnaround, where he's like, listen, I know I was bad, but Trump, he's made of liquid metal. If you want to kill him, you need my help.
Scaramucci and Sean Spicer are gonna team up to form like a super duo that is gonna like we're getting together to fight Trump. It's like, cool. Are we catapulting you like covered in explosives at the White House or something? Like that's literally the only way I want to help. I want you to help.
The two dumbest guys in U.S. politics.
Sean Spicer is now like he's already on his redemption tour by going on Dancing with the Stars and wearing a big frilly shirt that was lime green, and everybody went, "Oh my goodness, Sean Spicer!" Because that's what we do. Is we're always gonna redeem. Hell, Ellen,
Ellen fucking DeGeneres is like friends with George W. Bush. Never mind that George W. Bush's re-election campaign in 2004 basically hinged on culture war shit like let's ban gay marriage, and now, wow, one of the most visibly queer people in American life is now pals with George Bush. Why? Because she's rich and so is he. Funny. They have class solidarity.
Yeah, somebody told me, it's like, well, Bush has changed his mind on it. It's like, cool, he still killed like 1 million people though. So even if he's just like, wow, I was wrong about, gay marriage and gay people are really cool. They're people too. It's like, good, that's growth. You still like started a war and got a lot of people fucking killed.
Well, yeah, look at what we're fucking dealing with right now. Like, look at this whole like, oh wow, we're worried that Erdogan invading northern Syria might mean that all of the YPG guarding ISIS prisoners and their families, those people might be released and ISIS might stage a comeback. Who is ISIS? I don't know. I wonder if it has anything to do with the complete destabilization of the region caused by the failure of the fucking Iraq war. Whose idea was that? Oh, whoops. I forgot. It's the guy that you're friends with, Ellen. Cool.
I really wonder who's going to be the first one to do a Trump redemption after Trump leaves and he goes underground for like 5 years or so, and then we have somebody who's like even worse than Trump, like fucking Mitch McConnell somehow.
Tom Cotton.
Oh God. Or
it's gonna be Tom Cotton or Dan Crenshaw or one of that. It's just like the extremely online own the libs military dudes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is that like they'll all fall in line because as long as you can get someone who doesn't say the quiet parts loud but does worse than Trump, they'll be fine with it. They're fine with Trump. So I want to read really quickly we found an article in Foreign Policy talking about this. I'm going to read a couple of these paragraphs and just we can talk about sort of the situation because it is a very strange development given the normal sort of status quo with Republican tolerance of Trump. So this piece is headlined, "An Angry Congress Prepares to Rebuke Trump Over Kurds." It came out yesterday, October 10th. And it begins, bipartisan sanctions legislation targeting Turkey's leadership places U.S. President Donald Trump on a collision course with congressional Republicans furious over his decision to abandon America's Kurdish allies in northeastern Syria. Set to be introduced next week when Congress returns from recess, the measure represents a major rebuke of Trump's decision to pull U.S. troops from northern Syria and open the door to a Turkish offensive aimed at clearing the area of Kurdish fighters. The authors of the legislation and political analysts agree that the legislation, if it moves forward, is likely to pass with a veto-proof majority in both the House and Senate. Quote, the goal here is to make it that Turkey will pay a steep price for its aggression against the Syrian Kurds, unquote, said Chris Van Hollen, a Maryland Democrat and one of the authors of the legislation, which targets the personal finances of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and places punishing restrictions on the country's defense and energy sectors. Written in collaboration with Senator Lindsey Graham, the South Carolina Republican who normally serves as one of Trump's staunchest defenders in the Senate, the legislation is the latest example of the huge divide between the president's foreign policy instincts and the party he leads. His decision to abandon the United States' Kurdish allies has caused anguish with Republicans, with several senior party leaders speaking up in criticism of the president whose wrath they normally fear. And this is the last paragraph. Key among the president's critics is Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who in a statement this week warned that there exists a veto-proof majority in the Senate that backs a continued U.S. military presence in northern Syria. Quote, a precipitous withdrawal of U.S. forces from Syria would only benefit Russia, Iran, and the Bashar al-Assad regime. It would increase the risk that ISIS and other terrorist groups regroup, unquote, McConnell said, using an acronym for the Islamic State.
Damn, the plastics taking over again.
I mean...
It's interesting to see the back and forth, especially like because I'm so entrenched in left Twitter, because there's a lot of people who like think that we should leave because it's not our fight, but then you also have like the Kurt Schlichters and the Jack Posebacks who are like, yeah, we should leave, like we should be these are the people that would like want to bring everybody, like all the troops back home, like do full like nationalism and like not have anything and like and that's
bring the troops back home where we can use them to murder people at the border.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, basically. And that's the thing is weird is that like, yeah, I mean, Kurt Schlichter is full on board with abandoning the Kurds. His logic is, well, the Kurds never helped us on D-Day. Which I'm not kidding.
Where were the Kurds?
And apparently the funny thing is that there were Kurdish people who fought with the Soviet Union against the Germans. So in a way...
Right, did anybody invite the Kurds? Also, the Kurds were fighting like an uprising in Iraq in 1943, and the Kurds didn't have a country. So it's like, they're just like dudes who show up somewhere. Like, if they're not fighting in Kurdistan, if you see a Kurd like with a machine gun, with an AK-47, he's like, what's up? Who we fighting? You got some right-wingers that we're going to go fucking murder? All right, let's do this. Because they're, very, solidarity and left and everything. So
I mean, like I'm one of the people who basically says I understand the instinct to say pull military forces out, but I think that this is the one instance where the exception very much the exception exists despite the rule, because abandoning basically one of the the staunchest allies of the U.S., a secular and completely anti-Islamist, anti-authoritarian, extremely democratic group of people who have been marginalized for centuries. You're basically saying that their options are now allow the Syrian army, allow Assad's people into the area to protect them, and thereby control the area, or get overrun by the Turks, who hate the Kurds and basically have made it their goal to eradicate any Kurdish political or military resistance. So
I don't know. There's no history of that.
No, of course not. Yeah, Turkey has zero problems with that.
They just love kebabs and haircuts, those guys. They've never done anything against the Kurds or the Armenians. We won't hear anything of it.
So, long story short, this is one of those situations where I feel like the people whose voices I trust, even if they're even amongst very anti-imperialist, anti-militarist groups, are still dismayed by this because you realize what it represents. It represents an organization that has fought to keep at bay some of the worst actors in the region, basically being sold out to those people. And that's what's so fucked up about it.
Well, hang on, they've done something about Alec Baldwin.
God damn it.
I also want to bring up another bit with Lindsey Graham about how he managed to get pranked by Russian. I guess, Milo, who are these guys? Are they like Russian shock jocks? Like, is this some out of Moscow? It's it's Dimitrov in the vodka man. Like kind of morning zoo crew.
Vladislav and the bear.
Hey, I hope your drive time commute is good today in the greater Moscow region. I am
Make
here
sure
to
you
present
keep dash-
for the Republican.
Keep dash cam on. The crazies are out there.
Just playing RPG launcher sound effects. We love to see it. I mean, first of all, I'd like to state that Lindsey Graham is my least favorite of the Graham brothers. Bring back cinnamon, in my opinion.
Fuck.
Second of all, I don't actually know who the Russian pranksters are, but like immediately that I read this, I'm just imagining like, are any of you familiar with the page Squatting Slavs in Tracksuits?
Yes.
I'm familiar with the phenomenon, but.
Yeah. So there's a picture they post all the time of a guy in like Adidas track pants with a perfectly bald head wearing sunglasses squatting on the rail of a balcony with a bottle of Russian standard vodka in one hand and a huge old-fashioned mobile phone glued to his ear, and they always caption it "big business." And I just imagine Lindsey Graham on the phone to this guy being like, "Oh, how's the weather over there in Turkey?"
Hold on. I'm sending you the Politico article. Look at the fucking big ass flip phone that Lindsey Graham has in this picture.
This is incredible. Yeah. I'll pull it up. It's really big stuff. This is
my man's got
doing well.
Somehow in 2019, Lindsey Graham. I don't know if this is like his secure.
My man's out here doing business.
Holy shit. The bigger the phone, the bigger the business. The bigger the deal.
So let's read from this really quickly. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has in the last year become something of a congressional point man for President Donald Trump's negotiations with Turkey, leading discussions on everything from Ankara's purchase of a Russian missile system over the summer to their more recent incursion into northern Syria. So when he received a call from the man he thought was Turkey's Minister of Defense early in August, it didn't strike him as unusual. "Thank you for calling me, Mr. Minister," Graham said. "I want to make this a win-win if we can." But
oh my God, he's American Matt Hancock.
He is indeed. But it wasn't the Turkish defense minister at all. Instead, it was Alexei Stolyarov and Vladimir Kuznetsov, Russian pranksters with suspected ties to the country's intelligence services who go by Lexus and Vova.
You're listening to Vovan and the Lexus.
The duo have become notorious in recent years for their cold calls to unwitting high-profile Western politicians, including Democratic Representative Adam Schiff, leading to some to suspect they've had help from the Kremlin, according to The Guardian. Anyway, Kevin Bishop, a spokesman for Graham, confirmed the call's authenticity to Politico. "We have been successful in stopping many efforts to prank Senator Graham in the office, but this one slipped through the cracks," he said. "They got him."
Everyone's just constantly trying to like pull his pants over his head. Like, they love pranking Lindsey Graham. They just like, the Russians keep giving him a swirly. Like,
just imagine
the advisors do their best.
Lindsey Graham calling up calling up for the president. He's like, "Mr. President, sir, I've gotten some reports that we have Prince Albert in a can, and I'm not sure what that means, sir, but this is coming from our NATO allies, and I think it's very important."
I just love the idea that like there's a bunch of guys sitting there like, "We've been stopping those fucking puppets from calling in and asking him if his refrigerator was running, but somehow this one, Vladimir and the bear managed to slip on through asking for borscht recipes, and Lindsey Graham just loves a good borscht, so he really wanted to share that with the boys." But like also, he thought he was getting a call from a Turkish defense minister, and he ended up talking to a Russian. How bad is he at recognizing accents? Or do the Russians do a really good Turk? I don't know. Like,
Milo's the expert. Milo's the Russia / Central Asia expert here. You gotta.
Can you
Well,
do a
Russians
Turkish?
are constantly on holiday in Turkey and smoking shisha. So in that regard, I think they've probably got some sort of handle on the Turkish accent. But I feel like it's probably just like the credulousness of Lindsey Graham that we're mostly dealing with here. Just like getting a call from that guy, like, "Oh, hello, this is Dmitry, the new Turkish foreign minister. We're doing some outsourcing."
Thank you for calling me. Thank you so much for calling me about. Oh yeah, let's talk. And then he's proceeds to talk shit about Trump.
Yeah. Have you heard of vodka?
It says Graham also mentions Trump's personal interest in a Turkish bank case in the call that appears to refer to a U.S. case involving Reza Zarrab, an Iranian-Turkish gold trader and client of Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. Bloomberg reported on Wednesday that Trump had asked then-Secretary of State Rex Tillerson in 2017 to help persuade the Justice Department to drop the Zarrab case.
We love it. There always has to be an Italian-American involved at some point in a situation this dumb, so I'm glad that Rudy Giuliani's made an appearance.
I mean, it does all sound like the plot of some kind of, like, I don't know, like a police procedural on the in the UK that would have Idris Elba in it. And there's like the crafty Turkish gold dealer who's in with Vladimir Putin and or the Turkish government, and just general shifty stuff is happening. But the idea that Lindsey Graham, who like is a senator, has been a senator for a long time, has a staff of people that are, one assumes qualified to advise him on these things. I mean, surely they could have just at least, before they took the call, like confirm with the Turkish embassy that they have an embassy in Washington. Like, we do have diplomatic relations with Turkey. They could ask them, hey, is this the guy? And especially, like you said, if it's like, yes, I'm in holiday in Russia. My accent has changed a little bit. It's just from all the good food I am eating. Like,
yeah, incredible. Just some gold dealer just like pinning like bits of red string across his pinboard between like Lindsey Graham and the Russian radio host and going like, well, my friend, if he believes it is the Turkish defense minister, what difference does it make?
I mean,
I can imagine Lindsey Graham coming back and just be like, yeah, we've secured the sale of the F-35, but also we have to send like 500 crates of Adidas track pants to an address in Moscow somewhere. So, hey, I'm just doing deals here like the president.
But also something I want to point out too, Lindsey Graham was, if I'm not mistaken, he's a colonel in the Air Force. Like, he's gotten out now, but he was in the reserves. But he was an 06 in the fucking Air Force JAG. Like, this guy has, besides being a U.S. senator for decades, has also like been in the military. Like, the idea that he's this dumb, I mean, doesn't surprise me, I suppose, but this just seems like far dumber than someone of his, not even stature, but like someone in his position who should be ostensibly hard to reach, apparently is not. And it's like, apparently when it involves the Eastern Hemisphere, gold dealing, real estate deals, and Donald Trump asking a favor of somebody through Rudy Giuliani and his fucked up teeth, apparently all the rules go out the window, which seems to indicate to me that they've just become so accustomed to what you might describe as president crimes that like this was just par for the course, and Russian shock jocks can take advantage of it.
I want to point out also, they did this twice. They called him twice and managed to prank call him twice. Like, I was just reading through the rest of that article. There's a second time that they did this.
So I'm wondering, Milo, like the idea that this is somehow related to the Russian state. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I realize like it's hard to say yes or no, but just the idea that this is an emblematic of some kind of Russian soft power.
I don't think so. I think it's just like dumb, like, because there's enough of an imperative if you're creating like, and like I would say that like Russia, I've said this before on your podcast, but like Russia is very analogous to the US in that like the vast majority of its populace is like quite like poor, has little access to the outside world, and is like basically watches the Russian equivalent of Fox News. And so like that, if you're creating entertainment for like that demographic, you're kind of like generally taking the piss out of America as like quite a good vein of comedy to mine. But it just proves to me that the Russians have the world's best pranksters. I mean, we thought Bam Margera was the world champion for just like beating up his fat uncle who turned out to be a pedophile, but no, it turns out the Russians are just phoning up US senators and convincing them that they're the Turkish foreign minister. Genuinely something which would not have worked on my grandmother. Like, if we phone up my grandmother right now and try and convince her that we're the Turkish foreign ministry, I don't think it'd work.
I mean, who knows? But you know what, Francis? That could have been your brigade commander. That literally Lindsey Graham. That could have been the colonel. That could have been your battalion commander's boss. Is big old Lindsey.
Excuse me, two brigade commanders ago. my full bird colonel was under investigation for sexual harassment and misappropriating funds. Basically, using the defense travel system to take vacations and put it on his military credit card.
So I want to have some military scuttlebutt, by the way, some serious military scuttlebutt, because I happen to know somebody who was basically the headquarters company commander for a significant, like a high element of ISAF headquarters at Camp Eggers, Afghanistan. So he was a captain.
Camp Eggers?
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Okay.
There's Camp Phoenix, Camp Eggers, Camp whatever. There's a bunch of them. They're all centered around.
We name our camps either after mythological beings or dead soldiers. It's one or the other. So Eggers is Eggers is either like a bird that carries the sun across the sky, or like a private that got blown up in a tank.
Egged to death.
We also name our camps after inconceivable things, hence Camp Victory in Iraq. But the thing I wanted to say is,
introducing you, Camp Normal. Camp Extremely Normal.
I was hoping to go to Camp Casey Korea, but instead I got sent to Camp Regular. Fuck.
Shit.
So the thing about it is, also that's not true because no one wants to go to Camp Casey Korea. The point being here, my friend said that as a company commander, even though he was the captain, he had to be like the signatory on things. But some of the people that were organized in his company were like, full birds and 1, 2, 3-star generals. So he's nominally the commander, but obviously he's not the senior ranking person. It's just that he's a headquarters unit is organized in such a way that there has to be like a company administration that's in charge of everyone. And so like he was the person who was the signatory for like personnel actions. He told me that a certain Republican senator who will remain unnamed but might be contextually appropriate to this discussion made it a point to do meet and greets that would coincide with the end and then beginning of the month. So like 3 to 4 day jaunts to Afghanistan in his capacity as a senator, but then also as, at the time, a reservist colonel, because then he would get tax-free combat pay for the ending month and the beginning month. So if he went in the end of February and the beginning of March, he'd get 2 months of tax-free colonel salary and a combat bonus for February and March, and was constantly doing this to the point where it like became kind of a joke amongst people there. So,
I really respect that, I have to say. I mean, aside from everything else, that is really gaming the system. Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine though? Like that's that. So people are like, wow, whatever happened to a certain Republican senator? He really fell off the wagon when it came to Trump. He's just become insane. It's like, guys, I have a feeling that these people are really dumb and very grift prone, and Donald Trump has just given them a present in the sense that he's let it come out in the open. Like, he's basically said, hey guys, crime is legal now. I get to do whatever the fuck I want. And that's allowed him to basically, in a lot of ways, become similar to what you might describe as other ridiculous wet presidents in other countries like Turkey, Russia, etc. However, Francis, I kind of want to bring this back, talking about the situation with what's been going on now, because even if this gets reversed, even if Trump's decision gets reversed, I think the bigger thing that's going on that's crazy here is that the UN hasn't condemned it, the EU hasn't condemned it, NATO hasn't condemned it. Turkey is a NATO country. We have bases in Turkey as Americans. Erdogan said that if the EU or if NATO condemn this, and basically if he gets, if they get told that this is an illegal occupation, he's just going to unleash 3.5 million refugees from Turkey into the EU so that basically the fash can celebrate.
Damn, going full sicko mode.
So it's one of these things where even if this decision gets reversed and Trump has to go back on this decision, and they, U.S. military forces go back into their positions supporting the Kurds in northeastern Syria, I think that some weird fault lines have emerged here that have shown that basically what we used to think were the kind of like, I don't know, the counterbalances in situations like these don't really apply anymore. That kind of diplomatic condemnation, that sort of like the consequence, if a member, if the UN sees a partner nation go rogue in a sense like this, that they would condemn it.
Turkey's always been a weird one that we've had in NATO. Like they've always been, they've always been the cigarette smoking goth kid of NATO, where you're just like, all the other NATO countries are normal and they do their normal thing where they're like shitty, but like at least they keep it under the table. And somehow like Turkey wormed its way into NATO, and now we keep nukes. Like, I think we do it just because we keep nukes there, so that we can nuke
I was
Russia
gonna
whenever
say,
we want.
We put nuclear missiles in Turkey in the 50s.
Right.
It's like a 3-hour flight from Istanbul to Moscow. So like Turkey is situated in such a way that it's very close to what was then the Soviet Union.
Sure. So we always just put up. We always just put up with their shit. I mean, even with like, all of our presidents, even everybody's favorite, Obama, refusing to be like, yeah, the Armenians were genocided by Turkey because we don't want to piss off like Turkey. And I don't know why. Like, fuck Turkey. Like, honestly, I don't get why we do this like tiptoe thing around Erdogan and just like, oh, we can't anger them, we can't piss them off, we have to have our nukes pointed at St. Petersburg from here. And like like I said, we've always done this with Turkey, and now we're just kind of giving them carte blanche to do whatever the fuck they want with the Kurds. It seems very strange, and yeah, you don't see anybody other than even here's the fucked up thing. Like I said, this shows who's really for Trump, because like even evangelicals at this point are like, this is fucked up, we shouldn't be doing it, because the evangelicals understand like that the Kurds are the allies that we have here. Now, if you're wondering where Trump got the Kurds never fought in Normandy, that comes from our favorite non-elected official, Kurt Schlichter, who wrote a column about this, who yet like a year ago, 2018, was talking about how great the Kurds were. We can't abandon the Kurds. We have to do what we can with the Kurds. So you got people like Kurt Schlichter who come out and just like, yeah, we only supported the Kurds because of ISIS, but now that ISIS is defeated, there's no reason for us to do anything with the Kurds, which one is incredibly shitty. To be like, we got what we wanted out of you. We got our nut and we're about to leave. But two, also, we haven't defeated ISIS, like, at all. Like, I don't know fucking what anybody thinks is that. Like, okay, we've got them.
I hate it when America treats me like a groupie.
Kurt Schlichter is just like, well, actually, when I said we need to support the Kurds, what I meant was deep-fried Kurds, which are a delicious state fair food. And this film is dedicated to the brave Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan.
Well, and also you have Jack Posobiec, who a Navy intel officer who posts pictures of the YPG and the YPJ and the PKK wearing like anti-fascist shirts and waving Antifa flags. You're like, they're no allies of ours. They're Antifa, so fuck them. It's like, I don't know, what intelligence were you doing overseas that you can't? But also, Jack Posobiec was a hardline Pizzagate guy. So like, if you're ever thinking like, wow, somebody's in military intel, like I bet they've got their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the world. Absolutely not. Like Jack Posobiec was obviously like kicked in the head at some point in time, or again, he's just like really like Kurt Schlichter, just going down with the ship. Even though you can go back in Kurt Schlichter's like tweets and find him saying, nope, Trump is bad. We shouldn't. He'd be insane. Same thing with Lindsey Graham. He'd be insane for us to elect this man. Support Ted Cruz. Support, I don't know, Jeb, whoever. I can't remember who else was running.
I want to jump in, Francis, because there's something that So Cynthia made me listen to part of a podcast. I think it was Chris Hayes' podcast, but I'm not sure. But it was basically following a Democrat doing town halls in her district in Michigan. And she was from a district that was like elected a Democrat, but that was marginally pro-Trump. And she was one of the signatories on the impeachment op-ed. And in one of her town halls, she was getting shouted down by insane constituents. And one of her constituents basically told her that he supported Donald Trump investigating Hunter Biden and Joe Biden through the Ukrainians because you can't trust the FBI and the CIA because they've all been compromised by the Democrats and Antifa. And so you've got instead turned to people you can trust, like the Ukrainians.
The Ukrainian government. I love to trust the Ukrainians to investigate.
So
the Nazis we love and we know and love.
So our friends in Lviv.
So the point being here that there's a segment of the population that's Trump supporters that are also vehement Republicans that are also going to buy your brain pills and your stupid T-shirts and your bumper stickers and such.
Hell of a
And
way to
those
die.com/shop.
Exactly. They are so hardcore pro-Trump that basically nothing else matters. Trump is kind of like a totemic figure, and so it really doesn't matter. And I think the thing about Schlichter and Lindsey Graham and people like that is that they realize they have to they have no way of remaining in their current positions if they don't support everything Trump does. And the only exceptions to that rule are if they feel as though their support within some other critical community, not constituency, but rather like subsector of power in American politics, is going to be compromised by going along with something Trump does.
Well, yeah, because also like Trump like forgets what he said 5 minutes ago, so you can like afford to wait it out a bit with him. But just going back to what Jack Posterbeck was saying a few minutes ago about the fucking Kurds, I find it incredibly hilarious to take the stance of like, well, we can't support the Kurds because some of them are wearing Antifa t-shirts. Indeed, the Kurds oppose fascism, and therefore we cannot ally with them. Like, it's extremely saying the quiet part loud, especially when the earlier part of the discourse was like, well, where were the Kurds when we were fighting the Nazis?
No,
I hate it when we oppose fascism.
The anti-fascists are the real fascists to them. That's why it's easy to and they don't call themselves fascists. They call them anti-Antifa, which is like, guys, you're just fascists. It's fine. Like it's and you know, Jack Posobiec certainly is a fascist. Like, you know, no doubt about it. He would love for Trump to be a dictator, which is phenomenal coming from, you know, former troops who put their hands up to defend the Constitution, to be like, you know, that Constitution thing is really cool, but since my guy's in, let's just go ahead and fucking bin it.
Well, and I really do think that's indicative of the problem here, is that lots of people have been saying this, and decency libs have refused to accept it, that this isn't a question of being fair. This is a question of, you have a group of people in America who basically don't believe that Democrats should be allowed to be elected. So the laws can change. It doesn't matter. The laws can be broken at will. It legitimately doesn't matter. What matters is Republicans stay in power. Everything else is unimportant to them. And they draw ideological hard lines, and then 24 hours later draw other ideological hard lines that are the complete opposite of what they previously said, and it doesn't matter.
But the point is, they're rock hard all the time.
All the time, exactly. And the point of it is here is that all this is just basically sophistry. Like, it doesn't really matter. And the problem with the Democrats is that they're constantly treating that ideological argument, that hard line that's being drawn in this moment and then reversed the next day, as some political truth that they have to reckon with, like it's some kind of reasoned, moderated debate. They're constantly appealing to the hall monitors or the debate moderators or, I don't know, enlightened conservatives.
The recycling monitor, whoever.
As though that has anything to do, like that's going to solve the problem. Like the decency lib mentality seems to be that you've got to just point out hypocrisy, and once you've pointed out hypocrisy, it's like, you know, the end fucking 5 minutes of a Scooby-Doo episode, and you take the mask off, and you're like, well, George Soros, what were you doing all along? Like, and the thing about it is that it's so they've had ample opportunity to learn how useless and how counterproductive this is, and how much it winds up alienating ostensible supporters for progressive or left politics, you know, who would be willing to invest their time and effort with the Democratic Party if they could just feel as though their leaders would be trusted to buy into the same ideas, because they're constantly trying to, you know, find compromise. And the fact is, nothing matters to these people besides being in power and being able to just do crimes all day. Like, Lindsey Graham wouldn't be taking calls from, like, you know, Shady Zainab or whatever the fuck this guy's name is, about like gold deals and real estate transactions in Istanbul if he wasn't in some way invested in the grand scheme of it.
Dimitri, I was expecting your call. I just got off the phone with a very interesting Nigerian general who had a number of propositions for me.
All we have to do is just give them our routing number and our bank account number, and they're just going to give us, you know, we just have to hold it for them a little bit, and then they're going to go ahead and give us, you know, $10,000. It's a steal. It's way easier than going to Afghanistan and fucking stealing combat pay tax-free.
So I just laugh at this sometimes, because what I feel really bad about is that, I mean, bringing it back down again, unfortunately, in the last segment here, is that the people who don't have the luxury of being this facile and this, I don't know, like debate society about shit are people like the fighters in Rojava, like the people who are legitimately out there fighting ISIS and who stand to be massacred because, for all of like their gumption and their bravery and their absolute dedication to the cause, they don't have close air support. They don't have, you know, mechanized infantry. They don't have armor. They've got basically irregular light infantry and nothing else. And no matter how brave you are, you're not gonna stand up against fucking close air support and I don't know, like heavy artillery and tanks when you're people throwing hand grenades and firing small arms. Like it won't work.
I don't know, man. It's been working for the Houthis against Saudi Arabia. So fingers
Okay,
crossed.
look, you can't judge it based on Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the worst and laziest military in the fucking world.
Fingers crossed, man. Fingers crossed that Turkey's military manages to be just as fucking incompetent as the Saudis.
I love to be a Saudi lieutenant, just like eating my 20th candied date of the hour, bulging out of my uniform, causing yet another button to pop off on my blouse, going like, "Oh no, there's no one here to carry my backpack."
That is basically what I experienced working with Saudis when I was in training schools in the army. Like the extent to which they just cannot be fucked to care about anything is mind-boggling. So I feel like it would be unfair to compare the Saudis.
Well, hey, they recently started letting women in the military, but the question is,
In Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, will they allow women to get military driver's licenses? Is going to be the next question, though. It's like, all right, you can show up, but I mean, what do they do? Would you too like to go and get killed by a 16-year-old with a busted AK-47 and wearing flip-flops while you're in a tank? Because guess what we specialize in.
I love to make like really weird, like Wahhabi theological arguments about whether a woman should be allowed to drive a tank because it's not the same as a car, theologically speaking. It is actually for the glory of Allah.
So we've had a laugh, and as we put a caveat in the beginning of this episode, we're not Syria experts, and we're responding to this based on what we know and not trying to go into depth because none of us has stared at the Madness Rune long enough to know its secret incantations.
Oh no, I am a Syria expert. I'm going on the record. I have a PhD in Syria. Anything about Syria that you want to know? Oh boy, the capital. I know that for sure.
So,
hey,
long
Nate,
story short here.
Before you go on, I want to say thank you for being the first officer in the military who I've heard use the word caveat correctly. You said caveat as warning rather than caveat as in pivot off of. Do you want me to start giving a bad safety briefing like an officer who's a moron? Because I mean, I can go back in character if you want. To caveat what the commander was saying, y'all just need to orientate yourself towards this sand table that doesn't have the right map directions on it. So what I think we're going to do is do a presence patrol from, I can't even do it anymore. My brain is melted.
Presence patrol, where you make sure that all the gifts are very safe under the tree.
Well, the Presence Patrol was a thing that people would describe because basically we're going to walk around so everyone knows we're here. And it's like, oh, you're right, because the Iraqis otherwise would have forgotten that America was occupying Iraq.
The boys are back in town, baby.
They are, exactly. Cue up fucking Thin Lizzy. So, Francis, you did an interview on a completely different topic for our bonus episode this week, and we wanted to play that. So maybe you could introduce it.
I did. So I was approached out of nowhere when I made a comment about how Missouri is going for legalized marijuana. And how I was going to get my wife to get the marijuana card so I could start growing weed once I'm out of the military, sir. So a guy reached out to me, and apparently he's ex-military. He was a Marine combat engineer, and then a Navy oceanographer, and still works, still does kind of work for the Fed, but is interning in a place where they are doing all kinds of really interesting stuff with marijuana. So it's an interesting, like, it's a conversation about weed, but it's more a conversation about being a plant nerd, because like we're talking about genome splicing and the ways that they're working to create as many different strains as they can, and also the looming decriminalization of marijuana that's going to come, where it gets descheduled, and then every dipshit fucking massive company out there like Monsanto and Dow Chemical and stuff starts growing their own weed and patenting it, and then we have the same problem that we have now with farmers and corn, but now it's weed. So the best way
I'm
described
excited for Monsanto Hella Kush or something like that, just like going full 420 in their marketing.
The way he described it was that it's like imagine how we have like Anheuser-Busch now, but we also have all these craft breweries. So like imagine all the craft breweries exist before Anheuser-Busch, and they're like preparing for Anheuser-Busch to exist. So it's really interesting. There's a lot of really good science going behind it. we talk some plant nerd shit and some weed nerd shit, but we also talk a lot of military nerd shit. So
we didn't talk about sex nerd shit, so
did
it's
not talk
okay.
about
Don't
sex
worry.
nerd. Yeah, we didn't get into our weird kinks. So next episode we'll do that though. So please enjoy. It's wild because like you think about whenever you see the pictures of like this was corn before we started crossbreeding
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
This was what a tomato or an apple or whatever looked like before or a banana before like we started fucking with it. So this is like for me as a plant nerd, this is a really great like way to see how this process happens. But we get to do it so much faster now because
We have
10,000
a roadmap.
years ago,
Like
yeah,
we
10,000
have it in
years ago,
front
you
of
just
us.
you planted the corn and you're just like, yeah, this looks good. Let's keep doing it. And then, you have like in 20 years, my son, I have created this corn that is slightly better than the corn that was, 20 years ago. Continue my legacy. But now it's just like, scrape that plant. It's a male. Get it out of here. Scrape that one. Oh, that one's got the lemon thing. That's what we want. We want it over here. So like the daunting task of like, oh, we have to go back to the land base and we have to start over again. But like once you have this genome mapped, really it's like, oh, we have to start over again in which like we will get to where we need to be in like a couple of years or a couple of generations because we can, point to the ones and say this, and this, and now we can have these markers for these other minor cannabinoids, and these are the ones that we want to kind of raise these levels, but also keep the THC. So it's very interesting to see like, the process that we had, the 10,000 year process for corn, be able to happen for weed, but in like 5 to 10 years. At least that's what it sounds like. Is
yeah, that's where we're going. And like I've only been doing this for a year. Like how I fell into this opportunity is kind of fucking crazy. I was just like, all right, like going back to when I was talking about looking at the market and doing this as a side hustle. I was like, all right, who gets paid in this fucking industry and how does the price structure break down? And the way it's almost a 3-tier industry, I would say. At the top, you got the fucking CEOs and the execs that are making fucking bank. At the middle, guys who are clearing anywhere between 60 to a little over 100. These are like the operational managers. Think your company commander type, or XO types. People involved in operations, people who are lead cultivators, lead extractors, things like that. And usually you have to have, a good amount of experience. We're talking like a decade to get it, that kind of gig. And then you got, the dispensary folk, the cultivators, and I mean, you're getting like hourly wages there. Not great hourly wages either, I will say.
right.
So that's kind of how the industry breaks down.
Yeah. So you're kind of going for the science. I mean, and obviously you already said you have a good background in chemistry and science, so it seems like you found the perfect spot for yourself to do some become a geneticist. So engineer to oceanographer to geneticist.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy back and forth a little bit. Yeah, I don't, like I said, this was almost by accident, but when I realized fucking, breeders get paid pretty well. This is a very unexplored field because I knew a little bit about this stuff. When I was a forensic science major, I did a course in biotechnology, and I even did my undergrad internship in a biotech lab working on, like, we basically killed bacteria for a fucking summer over and over and over, and like recorded, how many died that morning, or whatever overnight, like just massive amounts of data collection on microbes. But taking that class, allowed me to understand. We didn't have CRISPR-Cas9 back then, but we had like TI plasmids and fucking agrobacterium, other gene editing tools that weren't as effective. And now, when I saw the industry, when I saw how the industry was in its infancy in terms of, being pre-green revolution stuff. So like in the late 1980s, when we started doing all these like, transgenic stuff, realizing how much we could get out of crop improvement to sustain a growing population worldwide and basically make fucking food affordable for people. That's when all these crops went through like serious improvement. And I'm looking at cannabis now, last year in 2018, saying this shit is like untouched fucking gold. Not only in terms of like what you can do damage wise in the industry if you come in with, plant breeding knowledge to the, degree that places like, Monsanto, knows how to do it. You're walking into, a target-rich environment, and there'll be no shortage of places, until the national deschedule happens and until, universities can touch this plant, because nobody's doing research on it, because nobody wants to put their NIH or NSF grant funding at risk. They don't want to, that's the bloodline of academic research. And so nobody's going to grow plants. And the reason I'm where I'm at is because I found a fucking program that does distance education in plant breeding. There's a couple of them out there. So if you Google around, you'll find these. And you can, if you work with the department, you can certainly do this in hemp, by the way, which, is nationally legal now, thanks to the 2018 Farm Bill. You can do it in hemp, and, like I said, the genomes are basically the same. But yeah, nobody's doing cannabis because the universities don't want to touch it. I'm doing distance education. I have a place that's willing to let me grow 200 to 400 plants, doing a dissertation, and, is actively giving me lab work experience, on the way up. It's kind of a unique position to be in, especially after jumping in, only a year ago, and being able to see a tissue lab get, culture. I'm learning under a guy who has a PhD in crop physiology and another dude who grew for the fucking cornbread mafia for like 20 years. I had to Google what that was, by the way. That's a real thing. Turns out they were like fucking huge movers on the East Coast. But yeah, like this dude, he's like their OPSO and their lead breeder, and the other guy's like the chief science officer. And it's just fucking crazy to see like this shit that's never been applied to cannabis, like being applied to cannabis, and working with, companies like Medicinal Genomics and trying to open source this shit and really trying to fuck the big corporate fuckers before they get in, so that, we pass this knowledge out and get the small breeding firms. So it's kind of more like, imagine if beer, like, Anheuser-Busch and all these fuckers weren't around yet, and it was just like all the microbreweries, and they knew the Anheuser-Busch people were coming in like 3 or 4 years, and they're like, all right, we got to get like all the best fucking processes out there so that they can't patent this shit and everybody can use it, and it's a fucking real even playing field. Right now that's kind of how it is. As soon as these guys get in, they're going to patent strains left and right. They're going to fucking map the genome as fast as humanly possible. They're going to make new crosses. And like when you talk about IP and patent law in plant breeding, the kind of, I don't know as much about this as I will a few years from now, but the gist of it is, if you cannot find this thing naturally occurring in nature, like you prove to the courts, or you can demonstrate to the courts that like, hey, fucking, you're not going to find this plant because we used CRISPR and we moved this gene from this one over here and like it doesn't exist, give us our fucking patent. They're going to do it, and somebody who tries to challenge the patent is going to have to prove that they found that shit in nature somehow and didn't fuck with it. So these guys are going to call dibs on all the best genomes and lock a lot of, small-time breeders out of those genetics. So that's not what we want to see happen. We don't want to see a monopolization of seed. We want to see, a fair and equal playing field for everybody, the way it's supposed to be.
So do you see that as being a, I guess you guys said you're open sourcing it. So everything that you guys create, you're just kind of putting out there, like, here's the process where we made these things, and then that's just out there for anybody.
So I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I was going to say, you mentioned, I know that, you're concerned about the Anheuser-Busch of weed, which, would be Monsanto, Dow Chemical, probably the cigarette companies as well. I'm sure they'll throw a lot of money into it. But also there are going to be these universities that are going to be able to work on it. I mean, I know that, yes, in the long run, deschedulization is for the best. But like, do you see this as somebody who's starting out in the breeding and really pushing forward? Do you see this as a worrisome future? Like, shit, they're gonna fuck it all up, or because I mean, it does seem like you said, Anheuser-Busch, sure, they've got the one big one, but like we all know it's piss beer, right? Like we drink it because it's cheap, but like if you want a good beer, you go to the microbrew that's making their own IPAs and Hefeweizens and stuff. So I mean, I guess, do we kind of see that like
Think about it a little bit
that-
differently in the sense that, you're working with things like hops and barley and shit like that in the alcohol industry that's generic. Like nobody's going to patent a substantially better hops plant that's going to fucking produce the best hops and everybody's going to go, ape shit over that one. With cannabis genetics, it's a different story. You're talking, and not only that, but think about less in terms of what people who want quality are going to go, because you're always going to have craft cannabis. That's not going to go away. What I'm talking about is companies that are going to be big enough to control the regulatory market via political influence and raise the barrier to entry for small breeders or small cultivators, such that all the small guys get bought out. It's really hard to get in unless you have a shitload of capital up front. And essentially, it limits choice in the market, in terms of free market economics. You're consolidate, it's monopolization in a sense. You're bringing less choice to the consumer. Maybe if you're lucky and you live in, this neck of the woods over here and you got a different, a decent craft spot, that's got enough capital to keep itself up and running, maybe you'll be lucky, but otherwise, you might have fucking the PBR of weed is like, one of your only decent choices around the way, unless you want to go 45 minutes out of your way to that place over there. You know what I mean?
Anyway, this has been the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. We're talking about creating that maximum dank, that real deep flavor shit. No mids here. It's serious.
I fucking wish we had some Joe Rogan numbers.
Damn.
So anyway, thank you everybody. Thank you Milo for hopping on in the middle of lunch to make fun of Lindsey Graham and to do some Russian shock jock jokes with us. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more of the those extras, you can get us on Patreon, patreon.com/hellofawaitodie. Patches, we got the patches, the ones that we've been putting out in the zine. They are for sale. I have some medic ones that are on that should be showing up pretty soon. And then we're going to be doing those. That's at hellofawaitodie.com/shop. Those are going to be in the show notes. So if you like that, go ahead and get down there and order some stuff. You can follow us on YouTube. If you like to get your podcasts on YouTube rather than having them delivered to your phone, you can do that. Just search for Hell of a Way to Die. You can follow me at Army Strength. Follow Nate at In These Deserts. If you want to get in on the zine, our next episode or our next issue is going to be about work. Whether work in the military, work in the real world, good experiences, bad experiences, things like that. So you can get to me, you can DM me on Twitter, you can email at sergeantjoker@hellofawaytodie.com, all that stuff. We are always trying to cram as much of our content down your throat as humanly possible. So if you're into that, we have lots of ways to do it. So Milo, what you got going on?
What do I have going on? I do a podcast with Nate every week. It's called Trash Future. You can check that out. And you can find me on Twitter at Milo_Edwards if you want to hear my dumb observations sometimes about the Russian meddling. And I also did quote tweet the Lindsey Graham thing today, just with the picture of the Russian guy squatting on the phone. So, if you're into shit like that, hit me up.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next week.